Welcome to this explainer. Imagine an army so incredibly disciplined that rival kings literally shook at the thought of them. An army so fiercely loyal, they essentially built one of history's greatest empires brick by brick. But here's the crazy twist. They grew so powerful over time that they eventually became a lethal, existential threat to the very rulers they were sworn to protect. Today, we're unpacking the 500-year saga of the Janissaries, the absolute elite military force of the Ottoman Empire. We're going to look at how they became the world's most respected soldiers and what exactly triggered their incredibly dramatic downfall.
So let's just dive right into this central irony. Seriously, what happens when an institution that is explicitly designed to safeguard the state suddenly becomes more influential than the state itself? Well, something has to give, right? And the story of the Janissaries is, without a doubt, one of history's ultimate examples of that exact breaking point.
Section 1. Birth of the New Soldier.
To really grasp their explosive end, we have to rewind all the way back to their creation, right around 1363, under Sultan Murad I. Now, you have to remember the medieval norms of the time. Kings usually relied on local nobles or temporary mercenaries who only really showed up when a war was actually happening. But the Ottomans, they completely flipped the script. The Sultan wanted a dedicated professional force. Enter the Janissaries, which literally translates from Turkish to new soldier. We're talking about one of the world's first permanent standing armies, engineered from the ground up to be unquestionably loyal to the Ottoman throne.
Section 2. The Child Levy System. But honestly, this raises a massive logistical question. How do you actually manufacture that kind of absolute, unquestioning loyalty across an empire that's rapidly expanding across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East? You can't just hire mercenaries and cross your fingers they won't turn on you. The Ottoman solution was the devshirme, commonly known as the child levy. Every few years, officials would literally go out and collect young Christian boys from villages in the Balkans to serve the state. It was a highly structured, obviously deeply controversial system that forever changed the destinies of these recruits and their families.
The devshirme was essentially a meticulous four-step pipeline. First up, they collected the boys, usually between the ages of 8 and 18. Second, these boys were brought straight to the Ottoman capital and converted to Islam. Third, they didn't just hand them swords, they provided an extensive world-class education. And finally, step 4, they were put through years of absolutely grueling military training. And, while this system meant heartbreaking separations for a lot of families, the reality on the ground was complex. Some families actually saw this as a massive opportunity, a guaranteed ticket for their kids to attain unparalleled education, serious wealth, and elite social status.
And in exchange for giving their entire lives to the state, these soldiers got unprecedented perks. Unlike your average medieval soldier who only saw a paycheck during active wartime, Janissaries got regular salaries and daily food directly from the government. They rocked distinctive uniforms, wielded the most advanced weapons on the planet, but it came at a seriously high personal cost. We're talking strict barracks life with zero margin for error, absolute discipline. In the early days, they were strictly banned from marrying or owning any kind of private business. They were essentially a perfectly oiled military machine with zero outside distractions allowed. Section 3. The Ottoman War Machine.
So you take that unwavering discipline in sword fighting, archery, horseback riding, advanced military strategy, and eventually firearms, and you get the ultimate weapon of the era. And the year 1453? That brilliantly highlights their absolute peak power. If you know your history, 1453 is the year Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror captured Constantinople. The Janissaries were the tip of the spear in this monumental victory. Capturing the city ended the ancient Byzantine Empire for good and transformed it into the glorious Ottoman capital we know today as Istanbul. This was the exact moment the Janissaries cemented their legendary status.
But they absolutely didn't stop there. They spearheaded these massive, sprawling campaigns across 3 different continents: Southeastern Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia. It was their precise organization and frankly terrifying bravery on the battlefield that actively built the Ottoman Empire into one of the largest, most dominant superpowers in human history.
Section 4. Protectors become the threat.
But as history constantly reminds us, nothing stays pure forever. Over the centuries, the incredibly strict rules that forged this unit began to erode, setting off a monumental shift in power. Let's compare. Early on, lived in barracks, couldn't marry, zero private businesses, totally loyal. But the later Janissaries, it's a completely different story. They gained immense political influence. They started marrying, having kids, they owned lucrative private businesses, they even started passing down their elite military ranks to their own sons through nepotism. They morphed from humble celibate servants of the state into these ultra-powerful political brokers who literally decided which sultan got to sit on the throne. As their privileges went through the roof, their actual military discipline completely tanked, and the rulers themselves started to genuinely fear them.
By the time we hit the 1700s, this lack of discipline wasn't just a nuisance, it was a critical vulnerability for the entire empire. The Janissaries just weren't the elite fighting force they used to be. Honestly, many of them were basically just wealthy businessmen and politicians playing dress-up in military uniforms. And the worst part, they actively, violently resisted any attempt at modernization because they were terrified of losing their cushy privileges. Whenever a sultan tried to update the army's tactics or weapons to keep pace with the rapidly modernizing European forces, these businessmen soldiers would just rebel. They were actively rotting the empire from the inside out.
Section 5. The Auspicious Incident.
So this internal rot, this total inversion of what they were created to be, leads us straight to an explosive breaking point. Just look at the timeline. From being established back in 1363, to their shining, world-changing victory in 1453, right down to their long, slow slide into political corruption in the 1700s, it all sets the stage for the year 1826. Sultan Mahmud II looked at the situation and realized he had to take drastic, unthinkable action.
Sultan Mahmud II officially declares that the empire desperately, urgently needs a completely modern army. And right on cue, playing their usual script, the Janissaries spark a massive revolt to protect their status and intimidate the throne. But this time was different. When they predictably rose up, the Sultan didn't blink. He did not back down.
In what became known as the Auspicious Incident, a swift, incredibly calculated, and deeply brutal maneuver, the Sultan ordered his new, loyal troops to completely surround the Janissary barracks. And he didn't just send guys with swords, he rolled up with heavy artillery. They bombarded the barracks, utterly and completely crushing the rebellion. Thousands of Janissaries were killed, arrested, or exiled in one fell swoop. 500. Think about that number for a second. After nearly 500 years of existence, going from the most feared, elite warriors on Earth to a corrupt political mafia, the Janissary Corps was violently and officially wiped off the map in a matter of days. The very institution that built the empire was utterly destroyed by it.
Which leaves us with a really profound final thought to chew on. How do we actually balance power, loyalty, and the constant need for reform in the institutions that are meant to protect us? The Janissaries left a massive, undeniable mark on world history, but their incredible journey, from being perfectly engineered, loyal protectors to becoming this toxic internal threat, it serves as a timeless warning for all of us. It reminds us that without strict discipline and without a constant, humble willingness to adapt and reform, even the most powerful, storied institutions on Earth will ultimately orchestrate their own downfall. So it makes you wonder, what modern institutions might be walking this exact same path today? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive leaves you eager to uncover more of history's great hidden lessons.